Can you tell us a little bit about how the weakness of the transportation infrastructure creates multiple modes within Bangalore?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting thing that I discovered after we opened our incubator and a couple of companies that I had started in Bangalore. Of course, we immediately began to engage in the difficult task of finding the right talent and getting people to come into the incubator or the companies. And we quickly found that a caricature of a common solution that's emerged is the transportation limitations and the time that it takes to get from point A to point B so onerous that people have chosen to work only where they live. There's a new life sciences cluster that's popping up closer to the airport, which is very far away from the city. And it's becoming its own little city-ette around which things are happening. So that's an interesting development. And for lower-end talent, so for instance, there's a chain of, I would describe as, this is a very nice example of tech-enabled entrepreneurship. My student and I created a sort of Starbucks for poor people around tea. So it's called Chai Point. And we have about 100 stores in Delhi and Gurgaon and a couple other places. But the tech it's built in Bangalore because the tech infrastructure is in Bangalore, and we built it from day one to support, we hope, several thousand stores eventually. But for that, we need people to man the stores. And I say man because you still wouldn't have a woman in the stores late at night in most Indian cities because of the lack of security, public security. So we need typically young men to be the so-called baristas in the store. We had to invest extraordinary amounts in creating the conditions to create, to say it the way I had articulated it before, including creating a separate training academy to train these kids who were typically middle school dropouts who had no prospects in life. And we would teach them things like, you've got to look at your watch so that you know what time things start. If you don't have a watch, here's a watch. You have to shampoo every day, and you have to cut your nails, and you have to wear a head net and gloves. No store in India wears gloves, so we're trying to make a point, a symbolic point. And
these are plastic.
Just like
plastic, yeah.
Yeah, just like your sanitary gloves when you are handling food and things of that nature. No store in India does that, not the highest end store, but we do. Because it's cheap and it's easy and it makes a point. Yeah. It has succeeded beyond anybody's imagination, just the littlest things. But we had to create the infrastructure to allow these kids to have a shot at life. Right? We had to give them accommodation, and this goes back to the point of little clusters. Because they're typically migrants from poorer parts of India who come into Bangalore with no education because they've heard Bangalore is a place where you can get a job. We would do things like rent a loft, and we would have, so we are mimicking at the scale of the individual entrepreneur what happens done by the state in Shenzhen to allow migrants from inner China to come to the city in the tens of thousands. We're a small startup with 100 stores. We employ close to 1,000 people, but many of them are housed in these little apartments that we rented. And you know what? The economics work out because the lowering in our attrition more than compensates for the incremental rent that we pay, and the goodwill that we get is enormous. The lowering of pilferage and so-called shrinkage in the stores, if you do the math on it, it's a no-brainer. But you have to have the slightly longer view to build that infrastructure out. And that's contributed again to this sub-cities within the big city type of pocket.